Hello, my name is Estelle Viljoen. In the previous video, we started discussing different approaches we can follow to make learning and teaching material and assessment tasks accessible for visually impaired learners. We are discussing practical examples of 9 different approaches. In the previous video, I shared 4 approaches, and in this video, I will cover the next 5 approaches. To recap, the 9 approaches are as follows. A picture or a diagram can be simplified or shown differently. A picture or a diagram can be replaced with a written description. A picture or diagram can be supplemented with a written description. A picture or a diagram can be replaced with a real object or model. An unnecessary picture can be removed. We can reduce the amount of information. Measurements can be altered or rounded off. Inherently visual material can be replaced with equivalent non-visual material. A question where a blind learner is required to draw can be reversed or a written or recorded response accepted. Let's look at the 5th approach. Sometimes in textbooks or even assessment tasks, pictures are given that are not really necessary or can sometimes even be confusing. So our 5th approach is to remove an unnecessary picture. This example is from the Foundation Phase Mathematics workbook. The question is, what is lightest and what is heaviest? A picture is given showing a soccer ball, a box of matches, and a carrot. This picture shows nothing about weight. Not even the size of the object says anything about weight. The knowledge is based on experience only. To make this exercise accessible, you can leave out the picture and ask something that your learners are familiar with and of which they know the difference in weight. For example, what is lightest? A soccer ball, a small box of matches, or a watermelon? What is heaviest? A soccer ball, a small box of matches, or a watermelon? When printing Braille, we have another challenge which we are going to address in our next approach to adapting learning support material and assessment tasks. And that is that we can only fit so much on a Braille page. How much? And what do we do to overcome that obstacle? This leads me to the 6th approach. We can reduce the amount of information. The following is an example from the Foundation Phase Mathematics. Here is the question. Boozy asks all of her friends to vote for their favorite party food. This is how they vote. Friend equals a smiley face emoji in this picture. The graphic has 4 rows with background colors light pink, pale yellow, pale green, and pale blue. There are 18 columns. In the first column, we see from top to bottom a picture of a can of cool drink, an ice cream in a cone, a cupcake, and in the last row of the first column, a sweet wrapped in red paper. In the first 10 columns after the can of cool drink, there are 10 smiley faces. Next to the ice cream are 17 smiley faces. Next to the cupcake, 10. And next to the sweet, 14. For the low vision learners, the colors and smiley faces are not bold enough, and the many vertical lines can for some do a very confusing little dance movement. For the blind learner, the pictures of a can of cool drink and the rest cannot be brailled meaningfully. The information is also too much to fit on a Braille page. What does that mean? A Braille page can accommodate 40 to 45 Braille cells or characters across a page at most. Each of these columns will take up about 4 spaces or characters. That means the table in the example is too big to fit on a page for blind learners. And the faces and colors might blur for the low vision child. To make the table more accessible, you can reduce the number of friends in each category and write out the names of the items, for example, lemonade, ice cream, cupcake, and sweets. If that is still too much for the Braille, give a legend saying, the first row represents lemonade, the second ice cream, the third cupcakes, and the fourth sweets. Or instead of smiley faces, just use a dot or any other symbol. In mainstream school exercises, measuring equipment is often calibrated in such a way that we cannot really accurately take a reading of whatever we are measuring. The Braille and low vision measuring tools are also not calibrated in such detail. So what do? The knowledge we want to assess is, does the learner know how to measure and what equipment to use? We therefore adapt our drawing or item to be measured to match the calibration of the measuring tool. In doing this, we apply the seventh approach: measurements altered or rounded off. This example is from the Intermediate Phase Mathematics Workbook. It says, measure the diameter of the circles in centimeters and millimeters. 3 circles of different sizes and diameters are given to be measured. The diameter of each has to be written down in centimeters and millimeters. Then learners have to calculate the radius of each circle in centimeters and millimeters. When one measures the diameters as they are in the workbook, they measure, for example, 4,3 centimeters or 5,7 centimeters. Braille rulers are not calibrated in millimeters. It is hard for visually impaired persons to measure that accurately. So to make the exercise accessible, we adapt the question by drawing circles with diameters in full centimeters or half centimeters. In the 8th approach, we will look at making inherently visual material accessible by replacing it with equivalent non-visual material. This is an example I chose myself, being a child of the mountainous Boerland, where Breyten Breitenbach also grew up. The question states, read the quotation from the poem My Heritage by Breyten Breitenbach below and answer the questions. The extract from the poem reads, his farm ran down the fish river. Ah, I see again the banks buttocking, steep and lush and blue before me. The sun a hill on fire, mountains with their rumpled cheeks. The following quotation from the poem is given, and learners have to answer the following questions on the quotation. Mountains with their rumpled cheeks. 1. Identify the figure of speech in the above line. 2. Explain how this figure of speech has been used effectively in the poem. Learners who are nearsighted or blind cannot see the sun, a hill on fire, mountains with their rumpled cheeks, and might not understand it because of its inherently visual nature. In assessment, it would be unfair, therefore, to ask them to explain how this figure of speech was used effectively, if the specific poem has never been discussed. We would have to replace this with a similar quote from this poem or another poem which is not so inherently visual. When we teach literature and poetry, therefore, we should spend more time on explaining metaphors and idiomatic expressions for the visually impaired learner. Our last approach to adaptation addresses the issue of making drawings in classroom lessons and also in assessment tasks. Some low vision learners who have better functional vision can do drawings, but most visually impaired learners will need assistance or require a different task involving the same content at the same level of difficulty. In some countries, blind learners are given an assistant to help them put their drawings in a format which can be marked for assessment purposes. Let us look at an exercise from an English home language task for intermediate phase learners. The question reads, create an advertisement using any materials or medium to advertise your favorite snack. Remember to consider your target market and the essence of what makes this your favorite snack. Which material or medium might be more accessible for the visually impaired learner? Some can perhaps make a poster, and others perhaps can make a recorded radio advert. Those who play an instrument or can sing well can come up with something really creative. In conclusion, there is no single correct way of providing accessible material and assessments. What is important is that we meet the individual needs of each learner and that the original purpose of the work is maintained.